This is The Shift, Stories of Resistance and Resilience, a multi-platform conversation series produced and hosted by Mark Travis Rivera, the professional storyteller. I believe that we must embrace the power of stories to create a more inclusive world. So this series aims to share perspectives, insights, and stories from professionals around the world about the role that resistance and resilience plays in our personal and professional lives. So, tune in, listen up, take notes, and recognize our shared humanity. This is The Shift. Hello. Welcome back to The Shift. It's time to get shifted so we can get lifted. My name is Mark Travis Rivera. I use he, him pronouns. I'm the CEO and founder of The Professional Storyteller, where I embrace the power of stories to create a more inclusive world. I do that through 5 pillars of activities: choreography, coaching, consulting, speaking, and writing. And I want to encourage you all to lean in to today's conversation with my very special guest, who I'll introduce in a second. And I want you to understand that the shift is back. We had to take a short little break while we were getting our life together on the back end, but we are back with new episodes dropping every week from now until the end of July. That's right, you heard me. Weekly episodes dropping from May through July. We're taking August off and we'll be back with more episodes starting in the fall. And so The Shift, as you all may know, is my multi-platform series that focuses on stories and conversations related to the themes of resistance and resilience. In 2025 and beyond, we will examine the role that resistance and resilience plays in our personal and professional lives as we continue to deal with the implications of a second term with Trump as president and the shifts happening worldwide, to roll back our human rights. Today's guest is Dr. Lakeya Cherry, who is the CEO and founder of Lakeya Cherry LLC, a partner at Evolution and an executive leadership coach who has dedicated her career to the growth and development of individuals and their organizations. As an ICF certified coach, a starting block fellow, and an I Am Remarkable facilitator, and a certified Dare to Lead facilitator, she believes that when leaders are empowered to reach their fullest potential, they will be able to support those around them more effectively. Her experience with coaching ignited her passion for supporting individuals, teams, and organizations to lead more authentically and courageously. Her former clients include Glassdoor, LA Clean Tech Incubator, Snap, Cisco, Takeda Pharmaceuticals, Southern Veterinary Partners, the Trust powered by the NFL Players Association, the Gates Foundation, Chicago Foundation for Women, Seattle Children's Hospital, UCSD, Palliative Care, Black Administrators of Child Welfare, and the National Child Welfare Workforce Institute, among many others. Dr. Cherry is the former Chief Executive Officer of the Network for Social Work Management, an international organization dedicated to strengthening and mobilizing diverse social impact leaders through education, leadership, development, networking, and community building. Under her leadership, the network has expanded globally and introduced transformative programming that has produced better leaders and enhanced organizational cultures. She also serves as a commissioner on San Diego's Commission on the Status of Women, which helps to address the needs of San Diego women in their social, economic, and vocational pursuits. And she is my guest today on The Shift. Welcome, Dr. Lakeya Cherry.
It's always so embarrassing listening to your bio being read.
Oh, no. I believe that you have to embrace it. You've earned it. You've earned every single accolade, every single degree, every single certification, every single milestone and moment. So I'm happy to read that. I hope I did you justice. I want to dive right in because your bio really focuses a lot on your professional life, but I want to know, who are you? Who is Dr. Lakeya outside of the professional highlights I just read in your bio?
Yeah, no, good question. In many ways, Mark, I'm still trying to find out who she is. For many years, my life was focused on achieving and climbing up the ladder, chasing, traditional notions of success. And now I'm someone who has hobbies. Yeah, I have hobbies. I'm someone who goes to Pilates a couple days a week. I've become a Pilates girly. I'm a golfer.
Oh,
I enjoy long walks. I am someone who is no longer doing work on vacations. I'm someone who now has more balance, who has better boundaries, who has joy outside of work.
Okay,
Yeah, that's who I
I'm
am
gonna
outside of the box.
I'm gonna need to call you after this conversation later this week and be like, "Hey, I need some help with the balance part because it has definitely not been easy for me over the last couple months to find the balance."
Oh, it's hard.
And
You have to fight for it.
yeah, absolutely. And I have to share this because I'd be remiss if I didn't share how we met. So we met while we were both attending TED Next, which is the smaller version of TED conference called TED Next, formerly known as TED Women. And we met in Atlanta, Georgia, and we were seated next to a mutual associate. And I had no idea who you were until we met in that moment. We didn't meet till the last day. And then, of course, we ended up following up with each other on LinkedIn and getting to have a coffee chat. And I just instantly fell in love with the work you do and who you are as a person, how you show up in this world. Um, we also are both admirers of Dr. Brene Brown's work, and of course, among other things, we share in common, like being total nerds and total like TED lovers.
Yes.
Um, I have to ask you, Dr. Lakeya, you talked about fighting for that balance. So I have to ask you, what is your personal concept of resistance and resilience?
Ooh. Yeah. Okay. So it is a fight. So when I think about resistance, um, I think about everything that we're navigating right now in the world. You and I both, we do some work around diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, who we are as people of the global majority. These things have special significance for us. They're even more meaningful for us. I've watched over the last year plus as people and organizations have immediately squashed all like verbiage around DEI, all activities and actions around DEI, for example. And so for me, resistance is just because it's no longer cool, just because it's no longer popular, if this is something that you wholeheartedly believe in, that's in alignment with your values, something that's important and meaningful and valuable to you, that you still find a way to resist and you still find a way to continue to do it. And so for me, with the work that I'm doing, I recognize that there's a lot of changes around us.
Mhm.
And I have to be mindful that, our work is impacted and can continue to be impacted. But I also have to continue to be in alignment with my values and with my boundaries. And so
Absolutely.
that's how I think about resistance. And then resilience, because you mentioned Dr. Brene Brown. When
Hmm.
I think about resilience, I think about going into that arena and being courageous and having something knock your ass down, like literally just knock you down. And you're shocked, you're stunned, you probably want to crawl out, you probably want to cry, you're probably hurting, but you still get back up.
Yeah.
You still get back up, and it might take a while, and you might have to heal a little bit. You might have to, bandage up your wounds or whatnot, but you're still willing to get up and you're still willing to fight. Um, when I think about resilience, I often think about, okay, you've now experienced this. You went outside your comfort zone. What did you learn from that encounter? And how can you go back stronger? And how can you go back even more strategic?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think something that is really important is that we are in many ways the fight of our lives for our
Yeah.
lives. I never thought in my lifetime I would see us digressing this far back. And everything from an AI generated Pope version of Trump being shared on official accounts to him disregarding court rulings to facilitate the return of Kamari Abreu Garcia. And it's shocking to me that we are in this point, and even more important that we continue to have these conversations about what it means to resist and to remain resilient in the face of adversity, in the face of autocracy, in the face of overt bigots who were willing to turn their back on everyone else if that meant they maintained their power. And I have to ask you this because you have made some various pivots in your career, and as I was preparing for this conversation with you, I couldn't help but wonder, wow, what courage it takes to pivot, to dare to shift, no pun intended, and to move things around until you get to a place where you feel like, okay, this is where my career should be. We know that society and social norms have this idea given to us or prescribed to us about what a career should look like, what a career trajectory should look like. And we know that it's very true for boomers and Gen X, not so much for millennials and Gen Z. And so, how can making pivots in your career be a form of resistance against the social norms of what a career should look like in today's age? How do you find that as a form of resistance?
Mm. In many ways, it's like reclaiming your agency.
Mm,
It's taking back your power, your control over your life, but also your own narrative. One of the things that Brene often says is we are the author of our own lives. And it's important for us to rewrite our narratives. So when I think about your question, like one of the first things that came up for me is years ago, my late grandfather, I had a good job. I was
mm.
working for the state. I was a clinical social worker. This is like over 15 years ago. And I was
You must
making
have
at
been
that,
fresh out of college.
oh no, no, I'm old. I'm old.
So,
I don't look it,
oh,
but yeah, no, I was already at this time late 20s. And
oh
so
wow.
yeah, so I was late 20s. I was working for the state of California Department of Corrections, and I had taken a bump in my salary. So I was making over $60,000 a year, right? And so back then, not to date myself, but I am, over 50, like I said, over 15 years older now. And so at that time, that was a lot of money. And I hated my job. I
Mm,
couldn't stand my job. It was miserable. Every day I went into work and I wanted to cry. I could not stand it. I was done with my work within an hour and I had to sit there the rest of the day. You couldn't go on the internet. You couldn't sit there and read books. You had to literally sit there and look productive. And I remember telling my grandfather at the time that I was going to leave this job, the good job, remember? And we're thinking about different generations and what they had
yeah.
been through. And I was told at that time that I was making the biggest mistake of my life.
Wow.
Like he literally, young lady, you are making the biggest mistake of your life. I told him that I was quitting the job. I was moving to Washington, D.C. to live with two friends until I could find my own place. And I was going to work at a startup. He didn't speak with me for months,
Wow.
4 months. And it turns out that was one of the best decisions I ever made. Me choosing myself and knowing what was right for me, regardless of my family's opinions and societal opinions over the good job, it was the best decision. I got experience working in a corporate environment. I got the opportunity to work for the organization that I led for almost 9 years. I grew significantly as a person, but my skills and my professional acumen also grew. I even ultimately ended up with a doctorate degree, and that wouldn't have happened if I wouldn't have left this role and believed in myself enough to pivot and pick up. And I've seen it also with my current role. I've been a solopreneur for almost 3 years full time. Thank you.
Same. This is the start of year 3 for me too. Whoop,
Yeah,
whoop.
so almost 3 years full time, and my business turns 5 in August. And when I decided I was leaving the role that I was in, many people thought, why would you ever leave something where you have this brand, this title, this position, you've been there, you know the ropes, you know what it is, you could just be comfortable. But
Mm,
when you're no longer happy and you're no longer growing, at some point you have to find the courage to get out of the situation. Otherwise, the way I feel, you're choosing to accept to just remain in that place. And if you're choosing to remain there, can you complain as much when you
mm.
made this choice for yourself?
You know, and I have to ask you because you brought up something that led into my next question, which is, I think entrepreneurship is one of the hardest things I've ever done, and you and I have been doing it full time now for around the same time. My company has not existed in this current form uh, full time before the last 3 years, but I've been doing this work professionally for 12 years, and as I decided to go full time at the end of 2022, going to 2023, I restructured my brand and organized things according to the professional storyteller. But given the current climate right now,
Mm.
what advice do you have for people, especially women of color, who want to pivot but are afraid to? Because of societal norms, because of relatives who tell them, "How dare you give up this cushy job," and all these other things, because that's what is expected of the next generation, right? That we do better than our ancestors. And so, how do you navigate that? What advice do you have for those people?
Yeah, I have a lot of advice. So, one of the first things I'd say is if you really want it, then you need to do it. You need to feel the fear and embrace it anyways, and know that there's coaches and thought partners and other community members who are going to support you and hold you up.
Yeah.
But that it's not that simple. And so just because you're like, okay, I'm courageous, I could do it, that doesn't mean you're ready. One of the things I've noticed, a lot of people have these desires and ambitions, but they have no brand.
Mm,
And so if you have no brand, and all of a sudden, for example, like me, being a coach, all of a sudden you decide, I'm going to be a coach.
right.
Nobody knows who you are. Nobody knows anything about you, what you do, what you bring to the table. With there being, especially now, a lot more coaches out there, why would they choose you?
Mm,
What's your unique value proposition? But can they even find you online to know that or to look it
right.
up? Do you even have a website? And so these are the things that I'd encourage people is to have a plan. Don't just decide one day, unless you absolutely have to, that you're going to quit your job and be an entrepreneur. Start building a plan. And so for
Yeah.
me, I mentioned my business turns 5 because I had a 2-year runway where I was exploring entrepreneurship as a side hustle to decide if it was something that I actually was interested in and wanted to do. All the while, I bootstrapped my entire business. So as I was making
Mm,
money, I was reinvesting since I had a full time job, the money that I was making into my brand and into my business. So if I have a speaking engagement here and I make $1,000, that's $1,000 that's going to go towards my webpage. And so all of the extra money that I made, I began to save it so that I could have a little nest egg, one
yeah.
to pay for the cost of running a business because it can become pricey, but then two, just in case, just in case something happens and you have a month where you don't have any clients and you
Hmm.
still need to pay your rent, and you still need to pay
Hmm.
your bills, you still need gas, you
Yeah.
have a little extra money in the bank that can cover these type of things. I'd also think about continuing education. Is there, while you have employment, if you have employment,
Mhm.
is there some other training that you could go to? Somewhere you could go to learn a little bit more about your industry and find a network. And so these are just a few of the things that I would encourage people to do, because I think a lot of people get into it without fully knowing this is a grind, just as much as a regular full time
Oh
job, if
yeah.
not more.
Yeah, I was gonna say the running joke in my family and friend group is, where is Mark today? Because I'm entering a busy season where I've been traveling a lot nonstop over the last few weeks, And
Congratulations.
thank you. Yeah, I say to folks, I'm like, I am highly caffeinated and stressed. So I'm highly caffeinated, stressed, and blessed. And this is my own merch. Good morning, beautiful people.
Oh, I love that.
The professional storyteller uh, store or shop is open for those who want some merch.
Love
Um,
the side commercial. That's right. Sell your merch. You're
you
like,
know, the marketer brain never turns off. And, I am a student of Barbara Walters and Oprah Winfrey. I grew up watching these iconic journalists on television. And if I can share a little bit of this, you and I were having a lot of conversations behind the scenes about how nervous you were about, this conversation. And I said, Dr. Lakeya, you like, me, like, I'm not some random person. And also, I take my training and my ethics seriously. There's not going to be any gotcha moments or anything salacious. I may be from Jersey, like Wendy Williams, but I'm not going to be like, salacious in my questioning. And so I want to thank you for your time. I have to, but to your point, I always get people that always tells me like, "Oh, how did you do it?" Meanwhile, they have no idea that I was in high school when I started my dance company. So I was 17
you
when I
had a
started my
dance
dance
company?
company. I did for disabled and non-disabled dancers called Mark Dance Project. I ran that for 10 years.
Wow.
While I was in high school, I finished high school, went to college where I studied journalism and women's and gender studies while running my dance company, while working 3 part-time jobs to pay
Yeah.
myself to get myself through school while being a full-time student. Then while I was in college, my speaking career started, and then I started to get invited to speak at various places like Harvard, NYU. I eventually gave a TEDx talk. And then after I graduated college, I was still had my dance company, and I started working in higher education full time. And so I had a 9 to 5, a dance company, and a booming speaking career. And also started working on a book, and all these different things were happening. And I realized then that when I was not forced to choose between one area of my passions over another, I was able to thrive. But
Mm,
eventually, what happened was my 9 to 5 no longer allowed me to fully integrate all of myself in that space. So I had to leave. And every job I had after that initial job after college only wanted me to focus on that one part of me.
mm-hmm.
And I was really unfulfilled and really unhappy. And when the second layoff happened at the end of 2022, I heard that voice tell me again, like, it's now or never, Mark. Take the leap. And to your point, I didn't have a safety nest. I I got to this point through a leap and a prayer. And, I always remind myself that faith without works is dead.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so I put in the hard work. There are people along the way who believed in me, who spoke my name in rooms I'm not in, who, saw my courageousness and my audacious way of being and existing in this work and encouraged it and supported it. Right. And so, you have to understand that entrepreneurship is not the opposite of a 9 to 5 in terms of you have more freedom and less security. I always say that flexibility that we have as entrepreneurs comes at a price.
Yeah, definitely. Years ago, early in my entrepreneurial journey,
Mhm.
I wrote this article called Why Entrepreneurship is Like Hiking. And, I'm not an avid hiker, but your girl
Okay.
can hike. And
Okay.
so I remember hiking one day with my partner, and, I'm like going up the mountain, and then it starts getting steeper. And,
Mm.
I curse. I was like, "Mm."
You can curse it. We can keep it real.
Meanwhile, I'm like all the expletives, but also
The panting.
I couldn't breathe. But then I'm still the achiever, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm not just hiking to be at a plateau. I want to get to the top. I
Mm.
want to see the view. I haven't been out here for hours just to turn around when I haven't even seen the view. And
Mm.
so we're going up, and my partner's like, it's okay, drink some water, take your time. And I'm like trudging along, and I get up there, and I'm just like, entrepreneurship is like hiking. And that was like my big epiphany that there's the moments where you're just coasting and you're
Yes.
watching the view, clients are coming to you, you're making money, you're in your bag, you're feeling fulfilled, you're joyful, and then something happens.
Yep.
Change happens. You know, you lose a client, or
Yep.
it's not what you thought it was going to be, or you're not making enough, or everyone wants your attention. And now, you know, you're frantic and busy and not taking care of yourself. And so there's certainly highs and lows and peaks and plateaus and valleys and everything in between. There's snakes, ew. There's snakes, you know, and you have to be ready for it. You have to be prepared. But I
Yep.
don't know about you. It's one of the best things I've done.
Oh yeah, I said I've never worked harder in my life, and I've also never felt more fulfilled.
Yeah.
I just posted this video on my social media about, living a life of purpose won't be an easy life, but it
Hmm.
will be a fulfilling life. And every day, Dr. Lakeya, I wake up energized and excited about the work ahead, even when I'm stressed out, even when I'm sleep deprived, even when I'm worried about how bills are going to get paid, right? Because I know that if I keep showing up, if I keep doing the work, if I keep being in alignment with my calling, if I keep living and working in accordance to my values,
Yeah.
the universe will provide.
Yeah. No, I
Like
feel the same way.
Q1 was dropless this year. And just as Q1 was wrapping up around mid-March, it went from dropless to a freaking tsunami that like literally turned my entire calendar upside down. And I'm like, oh,
Isn't it crazy how that happens where you're like, oh my gosh, where's all this free time coming from? I have no money, no work. And then out of nowhere, it's like, here you are.
you are. But and this is what I tell young entrepreneurs all the time. Even in that low season, even when I was worried about how to pay rent and how to survive, I woke up every day and I kept planting seeds.
Hmm.
And now I'm reaping the benefits of that harvest.
Yeah, yeah, no. And that's so important. That's so important to plant the seeds. But also, I don't know if you feel this way. I feel like I'm able to be my most authentic self now that I'm running my own business.
Oh
Where
yeah.
when you work for somebody else, I did a workshop earlier where we were talking about your leadership identity, your values, your
Mhm.
lived experience, and executive presence. And so I know when I work for other people, I was definitely more, not fully, but I was definitely more in alignment of who I thought I had to be and who I thought people expected me to be in order to keep this job, in order to do well. And I'll just
Mhm.
say it, be received as a Black woman leader. And now I notice because I have a brand and my own business, the clients who choose to work with me, whatever they saw about me, they still said, I want to work with her. You know,
Mhm.
I choose her. And so now when I'm presenting, I feel more comfortable being vulnerable. I feel more comfortable, you know, sharing a joke or making fun of myself or giving examples and, you know, leaning in a little bit more than I would have before because I would have thought that it wasn't professional.
Right, and Javier Martinez talks about this. He's from Plural. He has this whole thing about redefining professionalism and right and how we
Hmm.
need to dissociate from that mentality because it's a form of respectability politics that even when we are the most professional, we're still overlooked for opportunity because of our skin color. We're still dismissed or having to deal with microaggressions or overt isms in the workplace. And you as a black woman in America, at a time when 92% of black women tried to save our country from the hotmess.com of basket,
92.
92%. Every day I wake up, I'm like, this has to be a dream. This is some really long ass nightmare. Like the first 100 days felt like 3,000 days.
Yeah.
And so I don't know how we're going to endure in the next 3 years or so. Actually, I do know. Together as a community,
Hmm.
we don't
Yeah, I
get
feel like
to.
communities are getting stronger and
Yes.
people are remembering that we can't go at this alone, that
No.
we have to forge ties and, you know,
Yeah.
we have to support each other.
And to me, that is a form of resistance. that is how we cultivate and use the muscle of resilience to support each other. Because at
Yeah,
the end
that,
of the day, it's like someone had said, on one of my videos, just because we don't agree with your lifestyle doesn't mean we hate you. And I said, well, when did someone's disagreement of your lifestyle ever lead to you losing fundamental human rights
yeah,
or lead to you having experienced violence or near death experiences because of who you are? And that to me is trippy. But as we begin to wrap up, Dr. Lakeya Cherry, and I want to thank you so much for being here and for your vulnerability, for your humor. Whenever this week or next week when things get really overwhelming, I'm like, I'm on a fucking hike and I don't even like hiking, but I'm a guy. I got this, because I've worked too hard. I'm gonna see that view from the top.
yeah.
And so thank you for that analogy and that metaphor because while I physically can't hike because of my disability, I can mentally imagine the view and the peaks and the highs. What do you hope to shift in society through your work, Dr. Cherry? And how can folks get connected with you?
This is the time for my commercial.
Yes.
So for me, I want to shift and redefine what leadership looks like. And so my doctoral degree, I focused on addressing racial leadership gaps across sectors. I learned that there's a lot, especially in the nonprofit sector, a lot of people of color, the majority of people of color, have a desire to lead in some capacity, and they have complementary, if not more, education and experience than their peers, but they're being overlooked, similar to what you
Mm,
described. And it's not just within the nonprofit sector. We see racial leadership gaps across all sectors. We see it
mhm,
within organizations. We also see it in boards of directors. And so for me, it's important, let's just say that 92% and everybody else who wants to lead, regardless of your race, your gender, your identities, you should be given a fair, equitable shot
yeah.
at leadership. And so that's something that's really, really, really important to me. I want people to feel seen in the
Mm,
workplace. I want people to go into the workplace, able to be vulnerable and showcase themselves and feel as if they belong and not as if they have to code switch and
mm,
mask in order to be accepted. And I want them to go in and not just be a worker bee, but if they have that opportunity, that desire to move up, that they're actually given it. And it's not with a glass cliff scenario or some
oh,
other type of setup.
uh-huh.
It's actually something that is going to be for the betterment of the organization as well as the person who is being elevated. And so that leads to, I created a program called Change Makers of Color, which is a peer mentoring mastermind group for
Mm,
leaders of color across all sectors. And it's 4 months, 8 sessions, and it's an opportunity to come as you are. Remember that term, come as you are, be
yes.
seen, but also be supported and celebrated as you're navigating all of the different things that you're navigating in the workplace or in entrepreneurship. So that's something that's super important to me. In addition to that, executive coach, leadership coach, team coach, facilitator, consultant, speaker. I'm also,
Speaker.
wait, what do you say?
Public speaker.
One day. I do some speaking, but
Yeah.
I'm not you yet, Mark. And
Well,
so if anyone, go
I,
ahead.
I was gonna say, listening to you, I'm just like, you should be doing this more because you're so dynamic and you have this relatability factor that is just so effortless. I think that the key to my success has been that people can see themselves in me even when they don't identify like me,
Hmm.
right? Because I allow them to receive information in such a way that it humanizes and
Yeah.
acknowledges our shared humanity. And you have that similar kind of essence that is just feels so effortless to just connect with you, right?
Oh, thank
And
you.
so I just want to share that with you and thank you.
No, thank you. Because when I first saw you at TED, That wasn't the first time I saw you. So I'm a creeper. I had saw you. I had saw you. I saw you from across the way, and I was like, he's cute. What is he wearing? Ooh, I love the color. And then I was like, okay, we'll meet. And then we randomly, the universe,
Yeah,
it conspires in our favor. The
all the
universe
time.
just so happened on the last day to have us next to each other. And
Yeah,
so when Taina, our shared friend, was talking to you, I was like, hey,
yeah,
because I had already scoped you out.
yeah. So just to give y'all some context, she's not being a creeper. We were at a public event at a TED Next conference, and anyone that knows me knows that when I show up into a place, especially a professional setting, I'm gonna look fly, right?
Oh,
My
super fly.
outfit, my outfit's gonna be right, my makeup's gonna be done, my nails gonna be done. I'm gonna accessorize. Like that's just who I am. Because one, when you're at that kind of event, there's so many different people, and you got to figure out how you're gonna connect with people, how you're gonna stand out, because you never know who you're gonna meet, right? And
Mhm.
so the money I invested attending that conference, I made back within 6 months of attending the conference.
Teach me your ways. Well, okay, this is the end, but I can top that a little bit. I
Yes,
can top that a little bit. So
yes.
my first ever TED conference, we're talking big TED,
Oh,
Vancouver TED,
Vancouver Ted.
right? And so this is, I think it was, yeah, it was 2022, right before I left my job.
Yeah,
It was my first big event after the pandemic. I signed up to go to a leadership dinner, and then I was tired. And so, and I'm an introvert. Might not seem like it, but I'm an introvert. And so when I'm done, I'm done,
yeah,
right? Like I don't get FOMO. And so my friend and I were getting ready to go back to our hotel and skip to dinner. And we ran into Bevy, who had just given a TED talk,
Bevy Smith.
Bevy Smith.
The it gets
Bevy,
greater later. Bevy Smith.
greater later.
Yeah,
And that was when she had gave the greater later TED talk. And so Bevy was like, hello, my lambs. Like, who are you? Like, what are you doing? Whatever. So we're talking to her and we told her that we were tired. And so she's asking what we do. And we told her that we self funded our, TED experience. And she's like, and you're not going to the networking event? Oh, no. And so she encouraged us to, reapply your lipstick, do what you have to do in order to go have energy and show up as your authentic self. That was her message. And so my friend and I were like, okay, Bevy, right? And so we went on our way and we went to the dinners. I ended up having a celebrity who shall remain nameless at my dinner,
yeah.
so we were different tables. The table I went to, this celebrity was there. I was my authentic self. I don't know these people, and I was tired. So, and we were talking about leadership. We were talking about our superpowers, our
Yeah.
lived experience, our stories. Afterwards, I'll make this short. The person said I inspired them so much that they wanted to do something nice for me to help me take care of myself better as a reward for all of the ways I had contributed and given back to society before. And so I was like, oh, that's so nice, right? Didn't think anything of it. People make promises and say nice things like that.
Yeah.
TED ends like 2 weeks later. I get contacted by the person's assistant saying that I, stood out to the person and made an impression, and that the person wanted to gift me $50,000. Did I top you?
Yes. But here's the thing. Shout out to Bevy Smith because I absolutely adore her, and
Right?
she's right. She is so right. And I was exhausted, right? Because I wasn't staying at the hotel like everyone else. I live in Atlanta, so I was commuting back and forth. And let me tell you, it was the best investment I made and the most expensive investment I made to
Mhm.
date
Yeah.
for my business, and it paid off in 6 months. And to your point, sometimes you just gotta show up even when it's hard, even when you're tired, even when all you want to do is be introverted and go back to the hotel room and sleep or Uber Eats or whatever. Like you gotta show up because you just never know.
You
You
never
never
know.
know who you're going to meet. And one of the things that I tell people all the time, I'm very audacious.
Mm-hmm.
Half of the things I've been able to do is because I was audacious, because I dared to simply ask, because I was at the right place at the right time and I took advantage of that opportunity of connection, right? And so you can't shift things in your life if you don't dare to shift things.
Yeah. Dare to shift. I love that.
Dare to shift. Let's get shifted so we can get lifted. Shout out to my comms, my communications and storytelling manager and podcast editor and producer, Salim, who came up with that "Get Shifted, Get Lifted" slogan for us, because that was not an original for me. Thank you so much, Dr.
You're
Lakeya.
so
You are
welcome.
amazing. I hope that you feel much better now that we've had the conversation.
I do.
Okay, good. No more sweaty palms. Um, may you continue to be a possibility model. May you continue to lean on your skills of resilience and resistance. And may you always remember to embrace your story.
Mm. Thank you, Mark. I received
Thank you.
that. Thank you
Be
for
well.
having me on your podcast.
Thanks for being a guest. Thanks for saying yes.
You're
Be well,
welcome.
y'all. Be sure to check out the show notes to learn more about how you can connect with Dr. Lakeya Cherry. And if you're looking for an executive coach, especially someone as fabulous as her, give her a check out. Remember, her price is her price. Don't ask for no discounts. And y'all be sure to subscribe, like, and share this podcast episode with your network, with your community, with your friends, so we can continue to build community, get lifted as we're shifting the discourse around what it means to be resilient and resistant in a time like now. Thank you so much, y'all. Be well.